All right, we are live. This is draft week. This is the PFF forecast. Usually we do this Wednesday night, but we couldn't help ourselves. We had an opportunity to bring two of our good friends, Drew Dinsick and Andy Molitor, are joining us. And I figured, guys, since we have Eric here and the trade just happened, everyone wants to hear about obviously the team whose draft pick is most talked about. What will the Kansas City Chiefs do with all of their draft haul? What do you guys think?
I'm worried about the Chiefs, honestly. I don't know. I don't get the vision here. I don't love what's committed next year salary cap wise and the number of players that they have under contract. And now they're giving away assets like they're going out of style. I don't know.
There's a plan there. I'm finding out that I'm just a hater. When I try to talk about the surplus value of draft picks, I'm just a hater who hates championships.
You know what actually is kind of becoming clear? The longer you wait, the more likely it is you go from genius to just idiot in the NFL landscape. Like no one can stay on top. Really, coach, GM, visionary of, player construction, none of these guys can stay on top and just kind of do it cleanly. They inevitably lose a big game or, just are blinded by some specific bias and make a decision that, sets the franchise back. And we can get into the 49ers, of course, in this conversation as well. But let's say they get the guy they wanted all along and he ends up being the third best choice for this draft. I think it is very fair to criticize their process. Now that kind of getting a little bit more information about what's going on besides this behind the scenes, if this really was, all done to protect the chance that someone else might take Mac Jones, they might've gotten hoodwinked a little bit here.
Well, you were just excited to rip into the Niners, and the last dynasty. I mean, they did it all around their draft. I mean, that's what we saw for 20 years. Belichick crushed draft after draft. That's how you build it. I mean, that's why I'm really worried about the Chiefs draft assets right now.
It's very concerning, but we don't have to talk about the Chiefs because every single podcast gets brought back to the Chiefs.
I will say this to Drew, to respond to Drew a little bit though. I think the Ravens right now, I think that trade actually does signify that they have a tried and true process that, they're not going to respond necessarily to noise, right? So the noise was, right, Orlando Brown has to play left tackle because of an injury to Ronnie Stanley. He plays pretty well in a system that's very conducive to playing well. He has demands, and in a very Belichickian way, it's kind of like when he traded Richard Seymour, he's just look, this isn't part of the thing here. And, I know that they believe, and I think they're right, that they got a ton of surplus value here, and that's good on them. And they trust themselves, right, at 27 and 31, that they're going to get players who, if you roll those die, a number of times, you're going to eventually get better value than what you would have gotten having either paid Orlando Brown what he wanted or paid him a surplus for a right tackle just to make him happy. So I think good on Baltimore for making a move that, in my opinion, was pretty sharp.
They just were picking on the dumb kids in class. They're going to draft a running back here.
Well, look at last year's draft. As glowing as I would be about the Ravens, last year they took Queen,
running back,
Dobbins.
Same as the Chiefs too.
Those guys may end up being fine 10-year players for your franchise. I guess running back 4 or 5 year player for your franchise, but they really, it's just crazy because it feels like every time somebody does 4 or 5 things good in a row, they turn around and stab you in the heart. And it's when can someone just run a plus EV franchise without shooting themselves in the foot for a little while?
The annoying part about this whole process, this whole month, not only this, but free agency. And this is why you'll see a few of these draft props, guys who are draft, their mock draft or whatever, their over under set around 40, 45. They're going to go in the first round. There's such a wild dispersion of how teams value these players, and we have really no idea because everybody's so zoned in on these top 10, top 15 guys. There's going to be somebody that takes Rondell Moore way too early. Like in the first round, there's going to be one of these corners is going to get reached at or something, ruin my bet. Like, there's so many wild variations of how these teams value things, and you never get that side of the story when we're evaluating trades, when we're evaluating moves. Like they're not going to be like, here's our spreadsheet, here's how we valued all these players. We just get to look at it from an outsider's view, and then later on, in a hindsight point of view, and just rip on teams, which I'm fine with. I like that.
Yeah, I agree with you, Andy. I think that is how it's happening. I think that when you're a team and you trade for a veteran player, usually the excuse or the refrain is, look, we felt that there were 15 players that were worthy of first round picks on the board, and chances are that guy's going to be gone. And so when you look at like the Jimmy Johnson trade chart or our trade chart or whomever's trade chart, like we're valuing the picks as if we believe it's a normal year and the 27th pick is worth the normal thing, and the teams behind the scenes don't view it that way. I'll come back and say that's a huge overconfidence on the team's level. Generally speaking, like it's not year over year, you're not probably that good at saying, okay, there are 15 first rounders this year and there are 37 next year, so we'll trade back. Like I refute the idea that there's any sort of like certainty there or a team is squeaking out an edge by thinking that way.
Okay, let's get to the topic that everyone wants to talk about, because you mentioned something, Drew, that I want to get your opinion on this, because you guys are super plugged in. You read a ton of stuff. You are as in tune and attuned to the things that are going on as anyone out there. Talking to Chris just a few minutes ago, and he has on very good authority that trade was made with the intent fully of taking Big Mac Jones.
Yeah.
And that only recently, or not recently, but only since then, have they come off that, because people within the organization, and he thinks the fan base, this guy, have caused such a ruckus that it's pulling them off it. And you look at the markets right now, Mac Jones minus 335. This is on DraftKings Sportsbook. Trey Lance plus 300. Justin Fields plus 550. RIP to the syndicate. What if anything, do you have to add to that? And what are you thinking about this right now?
Okay, so I'm definitely of the mindset that Fields, from a talent standpoint, gives you the best chance to win Super Bowls over the next 10 years, because if you put him in the right system, you develop the guy well, he can be a top 5 quarterback in the NFL. And I don't see the same ceiling with Mac Jones. And I don't know why you would put so much future capital on the table if you're Shanahan and you have this as much job security as any coach in football. You put all of this, capital on the table for a player who you effectively, like, if that's what you wanted, like, just make an offer for, lowball offer for Kirk Cousins to Minnesota. Like, you could have gotten a guy that can do a Mac Jones, a little bit a Mac Jones impression. Pay him a little bit more, sure, but you could have gotten it for significantly less than you ended up giving up to make this move. And just behind the scenes, again, none of this is verified at all. But what I've heard, at least, is Philadelphia may have infiltrated the information circles of San Francisco, suggesting that they were going to take Jones 6th, and that's what prompted this in the first place. And then ultimately, the fact that Philadelphia facilitated the trade back up for Miami would suggest that they may have played San Francisco like a drum.
I just have a hard time believing Philly did something smart, but also at the same time, no. And I pose this question to everyone in here, but mostly to George. Which makes you feel worse about your front office? The fact that they would trade this much draft capital for someone like Mac Jones, the fact that they would trade up to the 3 and not know what they were doing yet, the theory that they've traded up to 3 and now are going to be swayed by fans on Twitter with their pick.
Great point.
All of these are horrible scenarios. They make me feel terrible about my front office, terrible about the decision making. I like, for your sake, for our sake, the fact that I like them as a front office, I respect them. I hope everything is horse shit There's like 2 people in the entire world that actually know who they're taking. Everybody else is out there just getting clicks, getting, look at my mock draft. I'm plugged in because they know everybody's going to be wrong. So who cares? And, and maybe I'll hit on it and be right. So I hope that's the scenario, because all the other scenarios make me feel really bad about that front office in general. Those are all bad signs. Those are flags, red flags.
Look,
we haven't even gotten to the worst part of this. The NFC for the next decade. I like the way
you think through these things,
NFC
Andy.
for the next decade is wide open. Yeah. Wide open. If you make the right choice here, and if you get your guy and you have stability in your franchise at the quarterback position on a cost-controlled basis with as much talent as you have to win now, if you're San Francisco, and the only things you have to fear in the NFC are old Tom Brady and getting older Aaron Rodgers, like, good night. Like, all the good players are in the AFC.
Well, and I like the way you think about this, Andy, because I think about it with almost like the Dak Prescott franchise tag and the Orlando Brown trade. And now this, it's like, if you scenario plan all these out, right? It's sort of like the Packers taking Jordan Love. Like, the best case scenario happened for them and they're still kind of screwed, right? Like, to me, that means don't do it, right? Like,
okay,
the best case scenario in the Mahomes thing was Alex Smith balled out and you got a 3rd rounder for him. Like, what are the best case scenarios here for you? The best case scenarios are you end up with Justin Fields and you still don't take him. Like, how does that happen?
Let me say the worst to answer Andy's question. By far, the worst part of this whole thing would be getting hoodwinked by a team that just hired Nick Sirianni, by a team that was routinely criticizing their head coach, Doug Peterson, in Monday meetings, that gave Carson Wentz a massive extension. That would be, I don't know if that's recoverable, to be honest. Like, that would make me lack so much confidence in what I thought was Lynch, who was maybe the best at keeping secrets, maybe one of the better guys at orchestrating deals that were in his favor from a draft perspective. The thing that would not cause me consternation is if they were able to be humble enough to say, at first, we really liked the jelly roll. We were kind of into the donut look. That was something we were ready to jive with. We liked the idea of putting him in to the weight room and turning him into Tom Brady. And you know what? We saw the light. That would give me a ton of confidence, to be perfectly honest. I don't
hate that.
No, yeah. I don't either. No.
Like that, and I just think that I just keep coming back to this. Especially this year, I feel like no one knows anything.
Oh, sure.
And so if there's anything here, and I'm looking at the markets and I go, Trey Lance, if they're really deciding between Mac Jones and Trey Lance, I am going to bet, Trey Lance 3-1. And I wouldn't, if I didn't already have so much on Justin Fields, I might bet him plus 550 because of what you said, Drew. Like, for them to be that counterintuitive to literally every other human on earth is hard to fathom.
Yeah, I've heard some smart people make the case that Jones is better than we think. And again, like, I feel like I have now kind of developed a weird slant against Jones, but when in reality, like, he made me more money than any college football player last year. Like, I won a lot of money on the national championship game with Alabama winning. And I'm kind of like, yeah, Jones might make some team pretty good. And but to think that he's the top 3 talent is mind blowing.
And you guys flustered me so bad that I got myself in a mute vortex where I
thought you were muted.
I muted myself and then I couldn't remember which whether the light blinking or not was whether I was muted. This is where I'm at right now.
There's one other real quick point I want to make on Shanahan in San Francisco, and then we should, I think we're being tough on you, to be fair. But there's another small thing that's pretty obvious that's happening here, which is you're giving Shanahan the opportunity to make a franchise-defining decision when his job is constructing offensive scheme, not evaluating talent. And there was a little bit of a loss of control at some point, apparently, in terms of who, was really driving the ship, I would guess. And maybe before they had really completed their full evaluation of the three guys, they pulled the trigger on this deal because the offer was there. They didn't want it to leak. They didn't want to get scooped. They didn't want to, lose, after they have to throw in more into the pot here. But it's entirely possible because we know this to be true. There are coaches in the NFL that are geniuses. Some of them wear hoodies that cannot evaluate talent to save their lives, even though that is their lifeblood, day in, day out. That's all they do is think about football and football players, and yet they still can't quite get their head wrapped around evaluating talent. And it's possible that Shanahan, he's not seeing what we're seeing, and that ultimately, Mac Jones will play out as the fifth best quarterback in the draft, like many people think. But again, so much of success in the NFL is where you land, how you're developed, even beyond, what your talent is. And, if we're belly aching because Mac Jones's ceiling is like the seventh or eighth best quarterback, yeah, maybe that's fine. Maybe they still do have chances at Super Bowls. And, it could be small.
The missing point, and it's because we're so removed from a season where they didn't make the play. It wasn't a good season for them, but the missing point, and Drew did hit on it a little. Not only is the NFC wide open, this is one of the best teams in the NFC with Jimmy G, if everybody stays healthy. They're in such a unique position with the top 3 pick as essentially one of the 3-4 best teams in the conference, if not the league. They can make it. They can, if they nail this, it's not just oh good, we got a good quarterback and we're gonna have fun. No, you're gonna win multiple Super Bowls if you nail this, because you're about to put together a franchise. And in the end, I think I trust Shanahan. I do. Eventually, I think I trust him. We'll find out if I'm right or wrong, I guess. Well, he's a Minnesota guy, Eric. He was born here.
Yeah, Drew brings up a great point as far as Jones. I think we're looking at him with a prior of pick 18.5. That's where it opened, right? Yeah. And so we view him that way, and and at the same time, I tried to bring up this with George when we were thinking about putting the Fields bet down, which was, Shanahan had Matt Breida in his backyard, and who's a great running back, and said, nope, I need Tevin Coleman. And he did the same thing with Jerick McKinnon. This is not necessarily a guy whose personnel decisions or talent evaluation should necessarily be trusted. But at the same time, maybe to George's point, if the Niners come off of this a little bit and make what we would view as the right choice, which I think to Drew and to Andy's point, the edge between the right and wrong choice here is slimmer than we're all making it. It's slimmer than Mac Jones is. Let's just put it that way. So we're so if they take Mac Jones, the scheme might be enough to make him the third best quarterback in this draft. In which case we're all picking nits, but they might just not have the high end talent to control the NFC, as Drew was talking about in the future.
But picking the third best quarterback in this draft isn't actually you don't get to hang a banner for that.
True.
I would
second best quarterback.
I only care about getting a top 5 quarterback. I want the guy that has a chance. So yeah, congratulations if you happen to get the third best quarterback in a draft. You're literally going to be fired if that's the case. You either get a great guy or you're looking for a new quarterback. Because I think if we've learned anything, it should be that Jared Goff, Carson Wentz, those situations where you are signing a guy early, I don't think teams are going to be doing that a whole lot going forward. They're going to be a little more willing to reload. Right now, if you guys had to say, I know the markets are heavily Jones, but what's your current calibration on where you see this pick going?
I'd still say 50-50 between Jones and Lance. I mean, the market has spoken that it's not Fields. And I don't get it. Something, obviously, there's some puzzle piece here that I'm not seeing. But pretty clearly it looks like 50-50 Jones, Lance. And again, we haven't even mentioned this, but you know what the risk really is in taking Jones, in my opinion, is that he's going to be behind an offensive line that's not great, and he doesn't have an NFL body. So he is an injury risk. And what have you exactly done to upgrade your situation if you're going from glass Jimmy G to a guy that may need a year or two to develop an NFL body behind an offensive line that's a little sketchy?
Well, and beyond that, I think the biggest risk is if he works out in a Goffian way.
Ooh.
Yep. Yeah. No, they become the Bears.
Because if he's okay,
don't do that to me. Don't you dare.
They just win 8 games for 10 years.
Yeah. Don't you dare.
If he's
that's
okay,
below 500 now, by the way.
That's why I actually prefer Lance in the sense that Lance might flame out, and that's a better thing in my opinion on average than having a guy be like Baker Mayfield. Because God, who knows? Does Baker Mayfield deserve a second contract? I don't know, actually, because some of these guys end up in Warren Sharp's tweet that says only 2 out of the last 100 quarterbacks are still on their team, and it's yeah, but if you sneak that number up 1 year, they all got 5th-year options and they all got a deal. It's that second deal is where they sucked, and I think to you, both of you guys' points, Fields has the potential to earn that deal. And I don't know if any of us see Mac Jones. We see him being okay in a Shanahan system, but do we see him earning a $40 million deal or the equivalent thereof in 3 years?
No, and I'm percentage-wise too. I think it's probably. I'm not taking Fields off the table. I still. You know what? You take Fields off the table. You know who else got taken off the table? Anthony Hopkins. People said he couldn't
That's
win.
Fair.
Just
thank you.
Things can happen. So I'll go Fields 5%, but man, I'm however you want to divide up the rest of it is probably somewhere in the 70-30 range. It feels like it's Mac. But again, if there truly isn't the information leaking out of Santa Clara, then it could be anyone. It could be any of the 3 quarterbacks. If everyone's just making shit up, that happens.
The circuit price right now is just out of control.
We saw the number for Jalen Phillips move during a live Periscope of us talking about this isn't sides and totals in the NFL. This is small bets that are being made and moving off of information that could just be noise.
Yeah, that said, though, there are markets that'll write significant bets. They'll write a K a pop here, and circa at this point is Jones minus 360, Fields plus 2160. So you can get you can go buy yourself a used car with a limit bet on Fields right now if he ends up going 3rd overall. None of this has made sense to me coming into this entire process. I would have told you Fields is 2 of these quarterbacks, and Wilson obviously the Jets fell for him. That's fine. But the fact that and now where does Fields go? I can entirely see a situation where he's there, he falls in the lap of someone like the Minnesota Vikings or something. And then you potentially have an interesting situation where, I guess at this point, I just want Fields to stay in the NFC so we get some Fields versus the Niners games. And in fact, I floated this kind of tongue in cheek and didn't realize it wasn't possible because of the no trade clause. But if I'm Seattle, I'm realistically considering shipping Russell Wilson to the Detroit Lions or something for their future of, blank picks and taking a guy like Fields so he can play San Francisco twice a year. But
was there a team? So was Miami on his list? I'm trying to think of how you could get that.
It was a weird list. It was a really weird list.
It honestly was probably not thought through. I'm sure he and Ciara would find they vacation in Miami. Those things are interesting.
Yeah, he had that awful short-sleeved Hawaiian shirt in that one picture.
It's just
he would fit in Miami.
It's not good.
I guess somebody previously brought up the Russell Wilson slander. I'm more concerned about Seattle from a coaching standpoint being a long-term contender here. It does seem
Russell's
the wheels are falling off, from the coaching point of view there. And similarly, the Rams, I don't know if Stafford works out long-term. And the Cardinals pretty clearly have coaching issues as well. So the NFC West is there for the taking if the Niners stay healthy.
We don't want it. We don't want it.
We want to keep it exciting. More breaks than Carroll. This is again Carroll just getting the right side of the opposite of the ass end of variance again. Like, is somebody caught more like luck than him?
Yeah, probably not.
No, I mean, just like Kingsbury not being the prince that he was anointed, Goff being Goff. I mean, basically everything that happened to the Niners over the past couple of years.
I mean, Brady's been kissed on the head by some charmed spirit. I mean, getting the AFC East for 2 decades and then flipping conferences when all the
And then Eric Fisher's Achilles.
Yeah, right.
I feel like Tom Brady is he like has a secret way of like putting a plague on a division. You know, it's like he comes to your division, all of a sudden like locusts are eating your crops. It's like, oh shit, our quarterbacks. Drew Brees literally lost all his powers. Tom Brady shows up and he just tanks. I will say this, but you know, I think I would tend to agree that it's more of a 50-50. Like I invested in Trey Lance right at the beginning, right when the trade happened. I just felt like he and Fields, who knew. I didn't even consider Mac Jones right off the bat. But I'm tempted. I may take a flight down to Vegas early here, Eric, and get 2160.
Can I ask George a real quick question?
Yeah.
If the process had been different, if this was all just a critique of process, right? And if they had stuck with their guns, waited at 12, no one makes a move up for Mac Jones because the market actually is soft on him, and they end up taking him there, and they have all of their future capital. How does your opinion change about all this?
I think it's a great point, and I do think that's a valid argument. I thought Shanahan it was actually one of the things in the press conference I thought made me think most that he was going to take Mac Jones, where he was like, if you're happy with him at 12, you should be happy with him at 3. And it's like, no, that's actually not how it works. If I want an In-N-Out burger, I'm not happy with it if I have to pay $5,000 for it. However, if I get the In-N-Out burger for $5, I'm so happy. I'm the happiest man on the planet. And I think that's how you have to view. Burger puns were unintentional, but here we are with, you know, a burger from a slightly worse chain, a way worse chain in Mac Jones. If you get him at 12, I actually think that's probably right in the space where I would take a guy whose ceiling is Kirk Cousins. Sure. If I'm picking at 3 and I've already spent that $5,000, your process indicates that you are shooting for a guy who has top 5 potential. And you look at the top 5 quarterbacks in any order last season: Tom Brady, Aaron Rodgers, Josh Allen, Patrick Mahomes, Deshaun Watson. Like there's a very key thread in 4 of those guys: unique athleticism and talent. And Tom Brady is just unique in the fact that he's probably not human at this point, the number of surgeries that he's had. So
there's no first round pick that's going to be Brady. Brady is the outcome of random chance. Like I don't understand selecting for what Brady is either. You know what I mean? Like, and to me that irritates me a lot. I will come back and say, I think if they got Mac at 12, that would have been a great draft pick. Like I think we're talking about the difference between In-N-Out Burger and Habit Burger at that point, and it's not that big of a deal.
Wow,
they're both good, and at 370, that's fine, right? So to me, I don't want the slander of like I don't think Jones slander is necessarily the way to go about it. I think and hopefully we've reached this tenor a little bit. To me, it's highlighting that Justin Fields is good. Like he's a great prospect that's done great things at the college level, and he does have some warts. Like I think the way he handles pressure is not the best in this class, but at the same time, his variance should be up. We should be talking about him relative to Wilson and Lawrence, and not him relative to Lance, who I think has the worst median projection of all these guys. And Jones, who I think has a good median projection, but not a great ceiling.
Al Michaels commenting here: if you're starving, you're paying $5,000 for a cheeseburger. Al, if I have $5,000 to spend, I ain't starving, buddy. Just got to point that out.
You want Justin Fields animal style. That's what I want, and I want it at a reasonable price. And the drafting him at 12 sounds fine, but the point Eric made there a little, the hubris of a team thinking they can create the situation where a Brady occurs. Like Drew said, like that's not something like, oh, well, yeah, we'll just find a guy with the similar traits and then we'll just turn him into Tom Brady. Like, no, it took so many things happening, right? The right coaching staff's landing in the right spots. And yeah, like you said, for 20 years, he was very little unbothered by the rest of the division. Like, what was the toughest part of that division? Like, maybe the guy who liked feet for 2 years were having some good teams. Like that.
Yeah.
What was that? Like 08, 09, where the
Rex
Jets,
Ryan's feet team, right?
the Jets were good for a couple years there, and outside of that, it was pretty easy sailing. And yeah, and then also, yeah, you talk about some of the mocks where some people put him at 32. That seems a little
that was
aggressive.
Chris Sims. That was Chris Sims. We can name him here.
That felt a little passive aggressive.
What was that? I mean, I like Chris Sims, the person.
I like some of his stuff. Yeah.
I'm confused. Like, even if you think he's not a great prospect, you're taking him before 32. We've talked about this a lot. And you guys create such fantastic content. Everyone who's watching this who doesn't follow Drew and Andy should go check it out. I personally like all the other sports because I can't follow them as closely. And so you guys do great stuff, golf, basketball. But I want to talk a little bit about some draft props. And you mentioned, look, after pick number 3, are there any trades? What do we not know about all these prospects that can maybe increase variance? How would you guys take advantage of this? Maybe right now, obviously we've placed a lot of bets going into this, but where do you see some of the value right now on the board?
I think speaking specifically to process, and then I'll let Andy kind of chip in with what he likes that's available at the current prices. I've learned now through doing this 4 or 5 cycles, so much attention gets placed on who gets picked in the top 10. That's just the nature of the beast. And so many of the bets that end up getting placed for whatever reason are because you're like, well, I like this guy. I hear this team likes this guy. Oh, there's a run on this guy. He's going to go in the top 10. Right. But there is a finite number of actual players who can go in the top 10. And all it takes is 1 or 2 surprises. And all of a sudden, I have unders on 8 guys. There's only 8 slots left. Right. And, and there's a general kind of minus EV nature to taking unders with the guys that are at the top. And then the other kind of clear lesson learned, when you hear anyone has medical red flag, blind bet it. Like they're all it takes is 1 or 2 teams don't even have him on the board. They haven't even done their homework on him, evaluated him, even if he gets to their tier. So a guy who everyone talent wise thinks, oh, this guy's a top 15 player. Caleb Farley, brilliant example. Caleb Farley, everybody agreed at the beginning of this process that is a top 12 player, top 3 cornerback in this draft. The third, at least 3 teams need a quarterback in round 1. He'll go in round 1. He probably goes in the 12th. He has a medical red flag, and his stock just completely plummets. And what happens is, if the guys who you would think are scouting and drafting him don't even have him on their boards, and then he's there available when the next tier of teams, is picking, they may not even have done their homework on him. And like, well, if those guys pass on him, well, maybe we should skip him too. And, there's a full-on domino effect that lights guys who have medical red flags up. So overs on the red flags, and then just lay off the unders from the top 10.
Caleb Farley, by the way, real quick, 23.5 right now.
Yeah.
And so I see that and I go, look, if the question was, would he get picked by 12? And then all of a sudden this medical thing comes out and he only drops 10, he could have dropped to 25 easily without that, He
might not go in round 1.
Yeah. There's enough variance there. I still like that.
I have an out where he's 22.5. And isn't that another one, guys? What do you guys think? Obviously, you guys have a lot of outs. You guys do, I think, a great job on your podcast of talking about the value of price. This right now, this is where I think you can really line shop. Yeah.
Oh Christ. Yeah. If you have offshores, if you have legal books, and you have like some paperhead outs, it's wild how many, especially once you get into some of these. And yes, there's way more variance down the board, and I think you can use that to your advantage. But you're going to find not only just price shopping, you'll just find bad lines like, oh, they didn't move, or they don't care because they're not taking big enough limits, where they've moved this guy like 15 spots for the most part in the market. They were off by a couple, now they're off by 17. Like there are a lot of spots if you do shop right. And to Drew's point, like it does turn into, taking a whole bunch of golfers to make the cut. Like I've seen that. It's like, hey, guess what?
That is the parallel.
there's a negative correlation. It's like horse race betting. Like they can't all get third place. Like you bet 6 horses to show, have fun. Like, only so many on the podium. There's a strict negative correlation to taking too many of those unders. I've run into that issue. I've got trapped in that, but not only the price shopping, but the arbitrage, middling opportunities. I took some under 4.5 cornerbacks in the first round, and I'm probably going to take some Samuel under, because I could, if things plop right, like the first 3 picks in the second round, you can find some 35. The first 3 picks under the right circumstances, they could all be buyers on a corner. If the Jets don't get who they want in the first round, Falcons could definitely look there. And then, obviously there's, teams that are drafting at the beginning of rounds are needy, usually all over the place. So I like that one because, and there is a scenario too, where I could see Samuel sliding into the first round and I still cash the under 4.5 with a Farley fall. And if Farley wants to fall far enough, and that's a tongue twister right there. But just like I said, there's guys whose over-unders are set in the 40s, mid-40s that are going to end up getting drafted on day one. There's guys that their over-unders are set from maybe even as low as 15 to 18 that you're not going to see that day. Stuff is going to happen. It takes one weird move, and then it's a butterfly effect of, well, this team doesn't need that kind of player, and they probably should take him because it's best player available. And then all of a sudden he slides 6-8 spots, and then somebody else gets bumped down. All of a sudden there's a weird run, and like no linebackers get taken, outside of one or something. It can get real weird. So I think taking some plus numbers on the lower end of the market too, and the lower end of the round on some of these teams, they're hanging like, will a team take offense or defense? And it's heavily tilted one way or the other. I think some of those, Tampa's a great example. I think some of those are way off just based on this team is 20 to 25 picks, maybe even further in. So much can happen ahead of them where it's like, well, they should have done this, but like all the receivers got taken. Maybe 5 receivers go way earlier than we think. And there's some teams that are just going to have to pivot to defense, are going to pivot. If the corners go funny, teams are going to have to pivot. A lot of times their secondary need isn't always the same side of the ball. So I think some of those bigger plus numbers are worth looking at the will a team take offense or defense first?
Yeah, I like that a lot. And I think the other thing is obviously one of the things you guys just, I think, highlighted a number of times here is that these draft positions are not linear at all, right? So if a team completely eliminates like Micah Parsons, right, from their draft board, and he were to fall to 16, 17, 18, like there might be some teams that are just like, okay, screw it, we'll take him. But there are many teams that are just like, no. And then, that means that that means that any sort of logic that we have about, this guy can't fall this far. It's like, well, I bet you,
what year was the Aaron Rodgers draft?
Yeah.
How many years ago was that?
Look, Orlando Brown can't be a bad trade according to Jim Mora. So, we know things here, guys. We're very smart human beings. I was going to mention Micah Parsons. So I actually, you mentioned this, Eric. Caleb Farley still here on the book I'm looking at, but apparently he just got erased from your book. So thanks, Drew. For nothing. But a couple to piggyback off what you guys are talking about. I think a ton of great points, and there are a couple players that come to mind here. So like an Eric Stokes, for example. Now this has moved a little bit. It's now 40.5, but he ran a 4.29. You mentioned Asante Samuel. And here's one that I really like, and I'm curious your guys' thoughts here because he's still plus 1,000. Zaven Collins to be the first linebacker drafted. What does anyone know about the linebackers? Micah Parsons is still minus 400. Azeez Ojulari is actually in this group. He's an edge defender, and then
I've heard he's going to fall as well. By the
way, you've got Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah, Zaven Collins. A lot of people have never heard of Zaven Collins. So I understand why he's plus 1,000, but if you go watch him, the dude is insane. That's one that I'm betting right now.
We've heard legitimate buzz on Collins and Jamin Davis as potential LB1. And I got him. I think I'm at like 7-1. Oh, okay. I got 11-1 on Collins. I think 7-1 on Davis. So maybe got a bad number there, but And again, like if there's any year you're going to get weird and play some big numbers in these sort of, these exotics, this is the year. The idea that there's consensus at all, considering that there was no combine, is ludicrous. There are teams that I want to say it was, the Washington football team is probably going to take one of these guys. I don't know that there's a defender that goes ahead of Washington, but that's probably
there's a couple teams that are tied to Davis a little bit. And honestly, a market I would be looking for is if somebody wants to hang Parsons, not first, anything, because I feel like you're going to get stung by some weird one. And it's like, how do you Dutch all the rest of them? I'd hate to be putting myself in a position. So maybe Parsons over, or just pick a couple you like. You can create a very low synthetic hold if you go shop around, because it's like, he's 10-1 here, but he's 15-1 here on like Davis. I've seen some 12 and 15-1 on Davis. Colin, you can get some high numbers. Wosu, I took some numbers on him. Like there's some ways to create a very low hold if you do shop around and grab a bunch of these guys. And for some small stakes to kind of just fade the Parsons look there. And again, the linebacker thing. Again, it's defense and the way people evaluate. I think the way people evaluate players, like I alluded to earlier, obviously different from camp to camp, team to team, front office to front office. But defense for me has been really weird as far as when I've watched these drafts in the last few years. Like, why would you take that corner first? Or why, I think a lot of funniness. Yeah, and team scheme, coaching, just the scouts.
Is just more unstable year to year too, and harder to predict.
Yeah.
And one of the things I think that's interesting, and I think I talked about this on the show today, like the SEC was horrendous defensively this last year. Like your biggest crop of Drew, you talk about you talk about the Alabama making you so much money. I mean, they basically earned every single yard they could have that was on the field against Ole Miss. Like the defenses in the SEC were terrible, and that's the one place where you get defenders.
Yeah. Yeah. I guess the idea of anything outside of quarterback being known, you want some examples? Last year, Alex Thomas to go, was it Alex Thomas? The Giants took 4. Andrew Thomas.
Andrew Thompson.
He played like Alex.
Andrew Tomlinson for the Jets. Anyway, very, very forgettable name. Excuse me. The Andrew Thomas was 20-1 to be the first OT taken on the board. And that was the 4th overall pick from a GM who telegraphs every move. And it was still a complete unknown that he was going to go Thomas. First kicker last year, Field, was 50-1
Yeah, we'll leave it at that.
3% at 10-1.
Yeah,
I grouped them all in one group.
Okay, you grouped them with you. Yeah, okay. There was a common thread among all the guys that were considered for first kicker, but it ended up being the Field, which cashed at 50-1. And similarly, Clyde Edwards-Helaire, first running back taken, was something in the ballpark of 10-1-ish, 15-1-ish, like a week before the draft. So those type of long shots are a fun way to attack this. And honestly, the idea of just throwing a dart and picking one is, that if you're having fun, that's fine. But there are people out there that have negative synthetic hold on. There are people out there that are laughing. They're laughing all the way to the bank that all of this air has been sucked out of the room on the 3rd overall pick, and they're sitting here with a negative hold across these 3 guys, and they're just like, reading Kyle Pitts to San Francisco tweets and sweating because they're like, I win no matter what, unless
they go tight end.
I don't want any more. I don't want any more of this talk. Okay, you guys beat me down enough. This was fantastic. Drew and Andy, tell us where we can find all your stuff.
I'm at whale_capper on Twitter. We do the Deep Dive podcast twice a week. We are football guys at heart, so most of our handicapping you'll find in the NFL space. But all summer long, we got some big stuff coming up. We did a Derby podcast today. We got Euro soccer to handicap this summer, which is going to be fun. The Olympics. There's going to be betting on the Olympics in Tokyo come August. So it's going to be an amazing summer. I cannot wait to get down on all these.
And then, Deep Dive at Deep Dive Pod. You can find me over at BetSperts. I'm doing a lot of blogging now. I'm literally about to do a golf show where I play golf on my Nintendo. So I'm going to do that right now. A lot of stuff like we did a derby pod. It's been a very busy day. It was glad to talk to you guys again, though. It's been a while. I love getting together with you too.
We're going to talk win totals after this. I'm going to listen to your derby pod right now while I go work out. So everyone, thanks for hanging out. We appreciate it. Thank you, Andy, Drew. We'll see you guys later. Peace.
Best luck.
Fellas.